Frank Moses is a retired black ops agent who lives a quiet and lonely life in the suburbs, minding his business, working out, and taking care of his little avocado plant. He receives his pension checks, but still calls the pension services hotline in order to speak with a specific woman, Sarah Ross. He lies that he still hasn't received his check, which he is holding in his hand, and he rips it when she sends out another. She asks about his plant, indicating they have been talking for a very long time. He asks about her day, but she thinks it's very boring and is longing for a life where she can travel as she pleases. The two talk until Sarah's boss comes to give her the stink eye. The following day Frank realizes his home is the only one without a Christmas decoration, so he gets himself some. A month later, Frank receives his pension and seizes another chance to talk to Sarah. He tells her he will be in her city, Kansas, for a week, and they consider meeting up in person. That night, Frank wakes in the middle of the night. He heads downstairs, seemingly unaware of the hit squad in his home. The men advance on Frank, but he ambushes and takes out the entire squad with ease. He hears someone radioing for the unit, so Frank quickly sets some bullets onto a hot frying pan and uncovers his stash hidden in the basement. Soon the heated bullets begin to explode, causing another hit squad outside to open continuous fire on the house, finishing off with a grenade. The men enter to clear the home, but Frank takes them out one by one. He then leaves the home and heads straight to Kansas City. Sarah gets in from a date with the guy when she walks past Frank inside her home and has to do a double take. Sarah begins to attack him, then sees that he has already packed her things to leave. Frank tries to tell her that men are trying to kill them both, but Sarah has a hard time believing. A team of men pulls up outside, so Frank grabs Sarah and they leave, with Sarah bound and gagged in the back of his car. He tries to calm her down, telling her they will look back at this and laugh. But Sarah is having none of it. We then meet young CIA agent William Cooper, planting evidence around a home in which he has its owner hung up by the neck. He then kills the man before heading to meet with his boss, Cynthia Wilkes. She has a job for him, taking out a retired CIA analyst, Frank Moses. Frank brings Sarah to a motel, leaving her bound and gagged as he is going to meet someone. At an old folks' home, retired CIA handler Joe Matheson is enjoying the view from his couch. Frank comes to greet him. Frank tells him about the girl and the wet team, then hands Joe a bag of fingers to ID his attackers. William is on board a jet, currently tracking Joe. Frank soon learns that the men were an independent South African hit team who also took out a New York reporter. Frank wonders why anyone would want to kill him now that he is retired and warns Joe to watch his back. Joe thinks it's funny how he has been through 2 wars, only to die at an old folks' home. William also tracks down Sarah, who is broken free from her restraints and is currently making a 911 call. He then calls someone, telling them to have cops intercept her. At the motel, Sarah is offered a ride home by a cop. She refuses, and the cop tries forcing her into a car and injecting her until Frank takes him out. They are driving away when they are hit by William, but Frank skillfully steps out of the spinning car, letting off shots at William, who is forced to retreat. They hit the road once more, and William follows. He comes upon the abandoned cop car along the street, but soon he finds himself surrounded by cops who Frank called on him. Joe is in his room when a man enters holding a gun to his head, and Joe asks if it's like that. When Sarah awakens, she finds they have arrived in New York. She is still hesitant about Frank and the entire situation but thanks him for saving her life. He wants her to stay with him until he figures out who is trying to kill them. Sarah notes it's not her best date, but not the worst. He goes to Chinatown to speak with the mother of the reporter who got killed. He wants to go in with duct tape, but Sarah wants to try talking to the woman. Sarah talks with the woman, who shows them a postcard she got the day her daughter was killed. The postcard has a number, and Frank deduces it's a call number for a book in Asian literature. They head to a public library where they track down the book and find a list of names. These are all people the reporter was investigating and who have all died mysteriously, except a pilot, Gabriel Singer. Frank then makes a phone call to Joe, whose room has become a crime scene. Frank calls the nursing home directly, where he gets in contact with Joe's caregiver and is shocked by what he hears. In Langley, William confronts Cynthia for lying to him about Frank's background. Without a word, Cynthia hands him a piece of paper with a file number. William meets the records keeper, who leads him into a classified room he had no idea about. He pulls out a massive file on Frank Moses, most of which has been redacted. The records keeper knows Frank well, noting he was a hero in his time before he retired, then someone classified him as red, retired and extremely dangerous. William then makes a phone call mobilizing every resource he has to track Frank. Frank decides to track down an old acquaintance, Marvin, who is suspected to be dead. They take a boat deep into the marshland and arrive at a cabin. Frank cautions Sarah before Marvin springs from his hiding place with a crossbow. Frank convinces Marvin that they are not here to kill him, so Marvin backs down. He leads them to a rusted-out car, which turns out to be the entrance to his secret bunker. He had moved in when he noticed a helicopter passed over his house last year. Frank shows him the list of names, and Marvin starts on his rant about the system, satellites, and chips, until Frank asks him to focus on the list. Sarah thinks he is insane until she learns that Marvin thought he was a subject of government experimentation for many years. Marvin retrieves an old file where all the names on the list were involved in a village massacre and its cleanup in '81. Only Gabriel has survived, and Marvin gets excited as he gets to bring out the pig. The three hit the road, and Marvin is paranoid about Sarah, wanting to get rid of her, but Frank reassures him she is not a threat. Marvin then notices a helicopter pass by and notes its registration number. The three travel to Alabama, and Marvin grabs a seemingly innocent woman outside the airport, holding her at gunpoint and demanding to know who she works for. The woman begs for her life, and Frank tries to defuse the situation, showing Marvin she has nothing in her purse. They meet Gabriel, and when Frank mentions the '81 mission, he tries to run but gets restrained. Up in a tower, he explains he gave the reporter no information when she came asking but learned she is dead. Gabriel explains that after the '81 mission, he was tasked with transporting a CIA agent back into the area to pick up a person. Marvin then notices the same helicopter, and as they try to confirm it, gunshots ring out, hitting Gabriel and killing him. It is William who has organized the hit and tells his shooter to tear the room apart. Frank, Sarah, and Marvin escape the room only to come under gunfire from the same woman Marvin held up at the airport. They are pinned down by gunfire from another shooter, but Marvin opens the pig to reveal a grenade launcher, which Frank uses to kill the man. The woman shows back up with a rocket launcher, which they barely manage to escape from. Marvin steps out with his pistol to confront the woman Western style. She fires a rocket, but Marvin shoots it, killing her in the explosion. As they drive, Marvin can see that Sarah really likes Frank as she is sticking around. He knows they can only go one place to get answers and will need serious help to get in. They turn up at the offices of a retired FSB agent, Ivan Simonov, and Marvin is hesitant to go in, as last time they put wires in his no-no areas. Frank walks up to the front gate introducing himself, but once he enters, he is surrounded by soldiers. He is soon met by Ivan, who has always dreamt of killing Frank, but now he is retired they can share a drink. Ivan reminds him that he killed Igor, his cousin, and Frank apologizes but reveals he is not dead as Frank flipped him and he now owns some burger joints. Ivan is happy hearing this and tells Frank to drink. Ivan laments that he hasn't killed anyone in years, and that makes him depressed. Frank reveals he plans to break into the CIA and wants all the information Ivan has gathered on them. A few days later, Frank and Sarah turn up to CIA headquarters disguised as a general and Sarah as a scientist using passes that Ivan provided. They enter an elevator which requires an eye scan, and when Sarah drops the contact lens, agents immediately turn up. She, however, gets the agents to help her search for it, and Frank gets it authenticated and sent on their way. Frank then breaks into the records room where he meets the records keeper. He requests the Guatemala '81 file, and the records keeper hands it over willingly and warns him about CIA agent William, who is after him, noting that he seems tough. Frank heads to William's office to test that theory, and they immediately attack each other. Frank lays down a beating on William, who does well to fight back, but Frank easily overpowers and restrains him. Frank then lets him know he trained the man who trained him and dislocates his arm. William tries going for a gun, but Frank drops a file cabinet on him and escapes the room. William then puts the entire agency on alert. Frank then meets Sarah in the break room. He then uses some items from a nearby janitor's closet to create a makeshift explosive, which blows up. Sarah lures a firefighter to Frank, who takes his uniform and slips out of the building. He goes to meet Marvin, who is waiting in an ambulance, but Joe steps out to greet them. Joe then reveals that the day the assassin came for him, he had actually shot and killed him. Cynthia comes to see a battered William, scolding him for getting beaten by an old man. Cynthia then warns him to get his shit together and find and kill Frank. Frank decides they need to visit an old friend. They arrive at a manor, and Frank enters alone. He enters a room and comes face to face with retired assassin Victoria Winslow. Frank reveals he is not here to kill her, and Victoria reveals her machine gun, indicating she was ready. The others then enter, and Joe greets her with a kiss. Victoria helps Frank with his wound, revealing she still takes a few missions every now and again to scratch her killing itch. She asks about Sarah, and Frank reveals that with her, he thinks he can have a real life. Everyone then goes over the Guatemala file and sees where everyone on the list is dead except for Marvin and Frank. The reporter had an additional name on her list, Alexander Dunning, an arms dealer turned defense contractor. Frank wants to pay him a visit, and Victoria wants to tag along. William is at home when he gets a call from Cynthia telling him she got a tip about Frank's new target. At Dunning's home, Victoria is scoping out the area where FBI agents are guarding the compound. Marvin, Frank, and Joe pull up to the house disguised as an African warlord and his guards. Victoria tells Sarah that she can see Frank likes her, so if she breaks his heart, then she'll kill Sarah and bury her in the woods. Sarah tells Victoria about how she and Frank met. Victoria also shares a story about a man she fell in love with but was sanctioned to kill. She didn't hesitate and shot him 3 times. Inside the home, Dunning plays a recording to throw off the FBI agents listening in. Dunning then leads Joe into his safe room, leaving Frank and Marvin outside with his guards. Inside, Dunning hears a buzz at his door, and Frank knocks him out with a punch. He wakes bound to a chair. He doesn't recognize the 3, but they reveal they went to Guatemala to clean up his mess in '81. They want to know who he flew out of Guatemala, but Dunning refuses to talk. Marvin and Frank then prepare some instruments to torture him. Dunning then reveals that the killings were ordered by the then Army Lieutenant turned Vice President of the U.S. Robert Stanton, in order to cover up Stanton's mass killing of innocent villagers in Guatemala. Now that he wants to run for president, he is killing everyone and cleaning up his past. Dunning's voice recording fails, alerting the FBI agents. Victoria alerts the 3 to the mobilizing agents closing in around the home. William also arrives to lead the charge. Dunning offers to negotiate with the incoming agents, but Joe knocks him out. William then calls, and Frank answers. He reveals he is coming in. Frank tells him the VP has been ordering hits to clean up his past, but William orders him to give himself up, then they can talk. The house is entirely surrounded by agents, and seeing no way out, Joe tells Frank that someone has to make the hard choice so the others can make it out. Joe decides to be that person and says his goodbyes to Frank. William gets a call from Frank telling him they are coming out. Joe steps out in a cloak and is immediately shot, to the shock of William. Frank and Marvin escape out the back, and Victoria lays down cover fire for them. Victoria and Sarah go to escape when Sarah falls and is captured. Frank and Marvin meet up with Victoria, and Frank learns Sarah is captured. Just then, Ivan shows up to rescue them, particularly fond of Victoria. They escape to a cabin and toast to Joe. Seeing that the VP is using the CIA as his personal hit squad, they brainstorm their move forward. Marvin begins to rant about the torture that Sarah could be going through, which causes Frank to walk away. Ivan comes to him, showing him 3 bullet wounds in his chest, which were done to him by the love of his life, Victoria. He knew she still loved him when she didn't shoot him in the head. He reminds Frank that one does crazy things for love, and with their help, they will get her back. Sarah is being interrogated by an FBI agent with William listening in. Frank then contacts William. He tells William he was like him once, very ambitious, but with age comes perspective. Things that one loves can be easily taken away from them. Meanwhile, another FBI agent is running a trace on the call, and when he gets the location, William is shocked to see that Frank is at his home. William begs him not to hurt his family, so Frank warns him to keep Sarah safe if he wants his family to live. Frank then tells him he will kill the vice president. William has FBI agents respond to his home and clear it before he returns to his family. Inside his home, he sees the Guatemala file and a list of names. He returns to Sarah with the file. He tells her that Frank is about to cross a line from which he cannot return and needs her help to find him, but Sarah tells him Frank is going to eat him up. He then tells Cynthia that the tip-off means someone is using the FBI and requests to be put in the VP's detail to help defend against Frank. Frank brings Marvin to a stash of weapons, and they begin to arm themselves. VP Stanton is hosting a fundraising dinner the next day. Marvin infiltrates the dinner as a chef, while Victoria arrives out front as a guest. VP Stanton is soon announced and steps out onto the stage to give his speech. During the speech, Victoria sees William leave the room. After the speech, Ivan pulls Cynthia into a dance. He reminisces on the old days and wonders if Victoria still loves him, but she tells him it's been a long time. After the dance, Ivan begins to spray gas fumes about the room while Victoria locks the doors with her necklace. She then takes out a Secret Service agent stationed nearby and changes into combat boots with Marvin's help. Ivan creates a scene, crying out gas and hitting the fire alarms, sending the room into a panic. The agents try to get VP Stanton out of the room, but it is locked, so they rush with him out the back entrance. They rush Stanton into a car, which speeds away. The car soon comes under heavy gunfire from Victoria wielding a mounted machine gun. Victoria has the agents and Stanton pinned down by constant gunfire, while William and other agents rush to provide backup. Another limo pulls up to pick up Stanton, but Ivan blows up the backup car before casually walking away. William and the agents arrive and are heading to intercept Victoria, only to see the machine gun firing on its own. The agents rush back with Stanton into the building, but Victoria and Marvin open fire on them, pinning them down. The agents return fire, and there is a gunfight, but the agents have no choice but to retreat. Victoria and Marvin go to move when they come under heavy gunfire from FBI agents. Victoria is hit, so Marvin throws smoke grenades to cover their position before helping her to escape. Cynthia tells him to go on without her as she is of no more use to them. Cynthia then stands ready, waiting to meet her maker, when Ivan shows up to rescue her, and she tells him she loves him. Stanton and two agents make it outside the building when they come face to face with Marvin wearing a bomb vest. He runs at them screaming, forcing the men into a full sprint down the street until another limousine pulls up, and they get in. William tries to get Stanton to stop, but he urges the driver to speed away. The limo makes a U-turn, so William launches himself onto the limousine, but they throw him off. Frank then shoots the agents and Stanton with a taser and ditches the agents. When Stanton wakes, Frank reveals he knows about Guatemala, and Stanton starts crying, fearful he is about to die. Frank then gives William their location, giving him 15 minutes to show up with Sarah or Stanton dies. William arrives to see Frank holding Stanton at gunpoint. Just then, Cynthia arrives with Sarah, and with her is also Dunning. Stanton reveals that Dunning and Cynthia were the ones who ordered the hits, but Dunning shoots Stanton. He then tells Frank he will only hand over Sarah if he surrenders to them. Frank drops his gun, and Dunning orders William to cuff Frank. He does, but leaves the key in Frank's palm. William shoots Cynthia dead, then Dunning's men are all shot before Frank knocks him out. Victoria, Marvin, and Ivan reveal themselves. Frank thanks William for the assist, and William decides to take care of the cleanup. Afterward, everyone is leaving in Ivan's car when Ivan wants to take up Frank on his favor. We then see Frank and Marvin with a stolen nuclear device, and the entire Moldovan army after them.